The stories that we've been told about who we are so deep in our consciousness that it takes a lot of work to get them out. And one things that you'll notice that if you get on my website and watch any of my YouTube videos is that I'm kind of snarky about and critical of the stories that come to us about non-duality and the way this has all come to us. Our last video was about how the conquering, the winners write history. And this is true in non-duality too, because the stories that we hear about non-duality and all the, beautiful gurus that we have and everything are that small handful of men who have managed to become famous teaching it. So it's a very small sliver of the point of view that could be really given to us if we were hearing more voices about it. And all of these stories come from these Eastern cultures that are very hierarchical. These are all conquered cultures to start out with. So we've been given this interpretation by these particular gurus about what it means to actually reach this state of enlightenment, and then what you do afterwards and what it means for everybody else. And so it's really become the story of you become enlightened and then you just sit there happy the rest of your life. It doesn't have anything to do with anybody else. It's very disconnected from everything else because it comes from a very disconnected society. So we need to really, really work on rewriting these stories. So I'm going to be pointing to a bunch of information on my website. I have a lot of books listed there, maprimzareen.com. And so what I want to talk about right now is the dawn of everything. It's a new history of humanity. And it's written by these two guys who were both anthropologists, and they're both named David. And throughout their lifetimes, it's like more and more information kept getting uncovered. And these guys are really brilliant. A couple of Jewish guys, actually. And they'd get together and they'd talk about, oh, look at this, look at that. And then they started kind of really looking at the evidence and going, you know, that kind of doesn't make sense. And the story that they were hearing and that we've been told about history is that human beings kind of lived in this darkness, without any civilization and, kind of in this darkened state of despair. And then as time goes on, then chiefs start becoming more powerful. And then we have, large tribes, and then it evolves into cities, and then cities evolve into culture. And finally, we end up with a written word, and we end up with, agriculture, and then, metalworking, and civilization comes along. And they go, wait a minute, this doesn't completely match up with the evidence that we're seeing on the ground in archaeological sites. And so they rewrote the history of humanity. And in a nutshell, they're talking, huge, hundreds of thousands of years and civilizations everywhere. And they say it looks way more like what happened was people were living these great lives, and then they'd start coming together and they'd start building cities. And of course, as far as archaeology is concerned, the only thing we find that we can actually find is something that's been built like in stone, something that's been built with something really solid. And so people come together and all of a sudden they start building things, putting together cities, and they come and they live together. And then over and over and over again, all across the whole world, everywhere they can find evidence, it got to a certain point and people just walked away. They said, nah, we don't like that. And they just walked away. And then after a while, maybe they'd forget and people would start building stuff up again. And then, boom, they'd just like shut it down and just walk away. So the question they're asking isn't, why did it take so long for civilization to build, and who were the brilliant people who brought in civilization? More, they were saying, why did we stop doing that? What made it so we couldn't just walk away? Because the natural human tendency is to always go back to the natural way to live. One of the stories that they tell is, if you read history books of the United States, because white people came here and there was a very advanced native culture here when we came. But one thing that happened was various handfuls of white people, for one reason or another, would end up living with native tribes. Maybe they were adopted as a baby, maybe they were conquered, maybe they just kind of walked out there and got, and met people and started living with them. And another thing that would happen then, people living in native tribes, and then they'd get rescued by, the white civilization, and they'd be brought back. And almost always, as soon as they could, they escaped back to their tribe. So that's kind of a clue that, wait a minute, maybe the way those guys were living was way better than the way we were living. And then another really interesting clue is, if you actually pay attention to native wisdom, what we're told is that human beings have a natural way to be. And here are the tricks and the tips and the ceremonies that it takes to stay in this natural balanced state, but that we easily can fall out of this. And so here are the teachings that we need in order to stay in this balanced state. So native wisdom knows that we tend to fall out of this, and that we're way better when we come back. So I really recommend reading this book. It's a little long, it's a little involved, but it just tells such an intricate new story about the history of humanity. And being able to really see who we are gives us way more of a possibility of coming back there. And if you can take these sort of ideas and start working it into your non-duality teachings, any seeking for enlightenment, you'll start realizing that what you are seeking is very much like that person who came back into civilization and then said, no, I don't want to. I'm going back to the natural. So it's not like you're going forward into fabulous enlightenment. What you're looking for is, what is this absolutely natural state of the human being? How can you drop the conditioned addiction to division? It's just a conditioned response to see division and to see things as divided. Can you drop that? Non-duality and enlightenment traditions say, yes, you can drop that in an instant by being willing to come to a place of zero And then from that place, you are going to be able to start working your way back into how the traditional Native teachings inform us how to be human beings with each other